welcome back to another Lady Leader Series webinar. We had gotten requests for very specific webinars, and one of the topics that people wanted to talk about was numbers, which I love so much that there was female doctors and team members who were like, I'm going to be completely honest, I don't really understand numbers fully as far as how to look at P&Ls. What does overhead actually mean? And then using numbers to make really good forward-thinking decisions. And so when I was thinking through who would I love to talk about numbers with, well, of course, the numbers guy, Jake Conway, of course, we have to include him. And Ashley, I think it had to go through like the higher ups, right? Of, could another man besides Mark Costas be?
We did. We had to get the approval of, this is a very, you've been inducted into a very elite group of women. So welcome, Jacob Barrett Conway.
I am extremely humbled and extremely honored to be a part of this. So thank you, ladies, for letting me infiltrate all this estrogen-packed group. So again, joking aside, I'm super, super pumped, and thank you so much for allowing me to participate and hopefully add a little bit of value today.
I think you're going to be adding quite a bit of value. And then my dear friend who I just adore, Dr. Monica Erda, who is in Chicago. The cool thing, Monica, and this is what we were just talking about before we started taping, is like, I've actually got to watch you. I'm just going to brag on you a little bit because I just heart you so much. Like, I've watched you go from really struggling and building your practice and working like insane amounts of hours and days to actually cutting back your schedule, adding associates, and growing a crazy, I think our last text was something like a $2 million practice in 4 ops. So just some pretty amazing things. And really what I saw in you was you used your numbers to make great decisions of how to get to that point that you're at. So welcome, we are so happy to have you. And then of course, as always, who I just love always having on all of these, Ashley, the GSD queen, who actually has to help all of us with all of our numbers and figuring them out and all of the practices. So welcome to everybody. Monica, I'm actually gonna jump in with you first and say, for people who don't know you, give us a little bit of your story and background.
Sure. So I just hit my 5-year anniversary in my office last week. We did a summer set of from scratch startup. It was a organic pet food store that we took over and we made into a dental office. And I thought, okay, 4 ops, that's pretty ambitious. I'll need to hit $1 million by year 5 to make some things balance. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do that. I'm scared. So I just kind of jumped in both feet, kind of just tried to build it. And then the end of the first year of the full 12 months of being open, we hit $1 million. And that's when I was kind of like, whoa, what happened here? I don't know what I'm doing. And I have $1 million business. And that's when I met Jake. That's when I met you guys. And I kind of got hooked up with the DSI team. And you guys really helped me put in perspective. My first phone call with Jake, I'll never forget. He's like, what are you doing? You needed an associate 6 months ago. And in my mind, I've only been open for a year. I don't need an associate for another 20 years. So I was like, wait, what do you mean? We've only been open a year. Like, I have a long way to go with this. So got an associate. We started doing different things, really kind of toned down some of my hours, increased my CEO time. And, it's just, life has been better. Profits have been better. The whole entire practice being controlled is better. It's just a better experience. So the associate thing, I think we always all talk about is tricky, finding the right one. But, even having one that's okay is better than having none and you're working 7 hours or 7 days a week by yourself. That's too much after a while.
Literally, was that your schedule to start with? Remind me.
Yeah, it was Monday through Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every week. And then 1 week a month, I was Monday through Sunday, and then I would not take a day off and I'd go right back to the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And it was, it was a lot.
Can I brag a little on her as well, Summer? I have some numbers here, of course. As we're talking numbers today, I'll share some of hers if you don't mind, Monica.
No, please go right ahead.
So when she joined us back in 2018, initially from 17 to 18, she saw a 40% growth in net production. Following year, 9%. 2020 will write that weird year off. But this year, heading into the first quarter of this year, she's showing another 47% increase in production out of 4 operatories. That is almost literally unheard of. So Monica, you're the perfect lady to be on this discussion here today.
Absolutely.
You gotta use what you got, right? We only got 4 ops, so we gotta use them. So
exactly.
You
I
are.
don't have a lot of space. So
You are. I was trying to, when we were texting, I was literally trying to figure out the semantics of all of it, because it is just almost like, what hours are you open?
yeah,
So,
I know.
yeah.
Jake, can you kind of explain what the swings of that mean? Because like I remember when we first started talking, you would talk about like this is some sort of profit swing, this is this growth on how do you read that and what does that mean to people?
So good question, Monica. So we look at basically what I said year to date growth. I'm looking at the first quarter versus the first quarter of last year. Obviously a little skew with the shutdown, but nonetheless, it's amazing growth looking at your previous years. But when we talk about profitability increase, which I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but basically we look at the average increase in your collection along with your decrease in your overhead. So your profitability directly correlates to those 2 numbers, which we could talk about in a second. But you've shown massive improvements in basically all areas, including those two numbers specifically.
Well, it's honestly it's thanks to you guys, because this was stuff that I would have a talk with my accountant like once a quarter and be like, hey, can I buy this new thing? And he's like, looks like you can afford it. And that was like my basic like dive into numbers. Looks like you can pay for it. Good job, kid. All right. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Talk to you next quarter, man.
I take your word for it.
Yeah, right. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Well, Jake, since we don't want to take the cart before the horse, we really want to kind of get down for people who are listening. I sometimes overshoot or undershoot what people need really as baseline KPIs and numbers. You and Ashley see so often newer doctors who come in, and actually I was one of those doctors who had practiced a while, and I had to be like, Jake, I don't actually really know what this means. So I will be the first to say, new or old, what are some of the basic KPIs and questions that, you guys can see people have?
So let's, this is gonna be a little bit of a lengthy introduction here to this. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. Shut up, Ash. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start with the basics here on the accounting side. So before we get to analyzing, we got to set your books up and your bookkeeping up correctly. So I'm sure that a lot of you out there have heard accrual versus cash basis bookkeeping. This is actually imperative as we start to build our analytics piece to see exactly what's happening in our practice. So we suggest accrual basis accounting versus cash. What that means is very simple explanation of that. When you get a dental supply bill, we record the bill when it comes in, not when you actually pay it. Because we want to see is what our true spending habits are. On top of that, as far as cash flow is concerned, if we're not paying our bills consistently, we should get some sort of monthly cadence to at least pay something towards that bill, if not paying the bill off completely. That way we get an accurate kind of cash flow on top of that. So again, when you're setting up your bookkeeping, go to your accountants and say, I want accrual basis. First of all, they're going to say, that's crazy. We don't do that in dental. Then you say, okay, that's great. We want a blended accounting. Or basically, we're looking at accrual basis on the expenses side. So again, we want to record the dental supply bill when it comes in, not when we pay it, and cash basis on the collection side. So basically, the revenue is what it is. The collection is what it is on the revenue side. So that's what we're going to set up first. And again, if I'm going too fast, you guys can stop me. And if I need to explain things more, we can do that. But that's again, the baseline, the foundational principles when it comes to starting that piece. So once we have that in line and we feel good about that, then we look at categorization, right? So this is the big one. So Samara, I know we've gone through many cases together in your practices and with our mutual coaching clients, and Ash and Monica, we've talked about this at length as well. But a simple example of this is, if you do implants, if you're doing some sort of ortho, what we call specialty procedures, we want to make sure that those are pulled out of dental supplies and allocated to lab, or at least some sort of tracking mechanism to make sure we're differentiating the two. We want to get a true accurate percentage for these different categories. Marketing, same thing. If we have some things leaking into that, we want to make sure we have a proper look at allocation when it comes to these different expense categories. I can share an allocation cheat sheet that we use in dental and custom practice analytics that you guys can use to set up your own chart of accounts, as they call it in accounting, to get an accurate look at where our money is going and make sure we're budgeting appropriately. So
As
again,
soon as
that's
we get
some of
off
the,
this call, Jake, can you share that in the chat?
yeah, totally. I'll do that absolutely. So that's the again, foundational principles, and I can answer any questions at the end of this, or if you guys want to message me on DSM, that's fine too, no problem. But that's the start of starting to look at overhead in general. So the next piece is
Hold on.
looking at. Go ahead.
Hold on. So real quick, hold on. So let's say somebody's new to this and they want to actually be able to talk to their accountant, like Monica's, who was like, oh yeah, you can buy this or whatever, which I see that often, is accountants really aren't necessarily up to speed with what dentists are really looking for. So you ask them, and I put it in the notes of what, hey, I want to actually set up more of accrual accounting. I want to really categorize these things appropriately. Would you recommend them actually putting the sheet that you're going to put in the chat notes, having them actually send that to their own accountants and saying, QuickBooks or whoever the bookkeeper is, these are the categories I want and how I want them to look?
Exactly. Yeah. Just say, I want the chart of accounts set up this way.
Okay.
And
because
very simple for them to do.
What happens, and Monica, you and I both know this, what happens when things accidentally, the lines are blurred and things are getting put in all different areas, or office supplies sometimes are put in back office supplies. Tell me.
Go yell at your assistant for being over budget that month.
Yeah.
And then you realize someone bought way too many paper towels and it's actually the front office's fault. So, right.
So often it's kind of like navigating with the compass being off. And so you're making decisions based on, I've seen it pretty badly. Tell me if anybody else here has seen this, where you're making marketing decisions based on a certain budget, and whoopsie, one, nobody was tracking the ROI. Two, it was actually being put in a wrong category, like software. I've seen it. And so they're saying, spend more money. Look, our budget's just fine. But really, they were never looking through the categorization correctly. Tell me if anybody has actually, Ashley, you were just shaking your head. Did you either see that or you're just agreeing?
No. I like even back in the day, with in practices that I was working in and working with, they were like, no, here's your overhead. And we're like, but wait, I don't understand. And exactly where is that going? And that doesn't actually go that. Where are you putting things? Like, they're like, no, it's fine. And we're like, no. So I've
so many
I've
offices
lived it.
like that.
Yeah. Yes.
I think the biggest one is marketing, honestly. People spend so much money on marketing, they don't know where it goes, and they're wondering why they don't have patience, and they don't know what works and doesn't work, and they keep funneling money into different things. So that's one thing. If people aren't tracking their marketing, they have to. I
also, and I don't want to get too off topic here, but I also think a place to start too is just how afraid people are to even look. If the accountant says it's okay, so it's probably okay. I don't need to look. It's fine, and really they're almost afraid to understand the numbers, which
absolutely
don't be afraid of them. Yep, knowledge is power.
Well, and that's where I'm like, Jake, like, you're assuming that people have bookkeepers or accountants that maybe know this. I'm saying for the ones that maybe don't, where do we start with all of this? And it's asking them to do their accrual accounting, sending them the sheet of this is where the categories need to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And then in addition, it would be, what do you say with what the information they're getting back from the bookkeeper? Because I know you're going to kind of launch into KPIs, but it's almost like you have to have all of this figured out before your KPIs are even correct.
Yeah, no, of course. That's the foundational principles. And, once you get at least, 80% of the way there, you can then go through your books and kind of understand where things should be categorized until you're 100% streamlined with this, basically. So you can look at these chart of accounts and do kind of your own homework on the back end until you can get your accountants on board. And if you can't, accountants are a dime a dozen. You can find a good bookkeeper. So don't be afraid to switch. I will say that too. But again, so getting back to your question here, Summer, I think we had a question come in. But anyway,
I got it. Yep.
Okay, so getting into the analyzation piece, which is identifying what overhead truly is. Now so again, as we see it in DSI and in custom practice analytics, we classify overhead or categorize overhead as all expenses outside of doctor compensation. So I guess I will go through those two pretty extensively here, unless you have anything to add, Summer.
Keep going. Yep, keep going.
Okay. So overhead, again, all expenses outside of doctor compensation. So this is all fixed and variable costs. And I'll go into those real quickly as well. So fixed costs basically are expenses that don't change based on the performance of the practice. For instance, rent and utilities, the facility cost. That's not going to change based on your production. However, on the variable side of expenses, like dental supplies and lab, those will fluctuate with your production and the revenue of the practice. So again, very easy distinction, but two very important distinctions, because as you start to try to cut down overhead, there's only so many ways to do that. We can only squeeze down variable cost, right? Our spending habits and supplies, marketing, which we talked about, our lab usage, that sort of thing, office expenses. But at some point, we have to increase our revenue to decrease all of those fixed costs, because those are not going anywhere. Those are going to stay the same no matter what. So again, as you move through this, you have to make those distinctions very clearly. Again, as Summer mentioned earlier, to make decisions based on the needs of the practice next. So it's discovery, then we're going to identify, and then we're going to start to digging into what we call the symptom cause solution approach in custom practice analytics. So once we define our overhead, again, all expenses outside of doctor pay, we have certain thresholds and certain goals we shoot for. So for instance, our phase one goal, as we call it, which you guys probably have heard, is 60% overhead or lower. Phase two is 55. Phase three is 50% or lower. And in these two ladies' cases, in Monica and Summer, we opened up a new category, which is phase four, which is 45% or overhead or lower. And that is a general practice, which is crazy. But
Yay.
again, these are different, right? These are different thresholds that we shoot for. So let's say we're a pre-phase one, phase zero, as we call it, and we're trying to get from 66 to whatever to 60% overhead, right? We're going to start looking at what we call low-hanging fruit, which is a lot of comes from our variable costs, right? So this is going to be supplies, lab, hygiene is a profit center, which we can get into. But again, these are some of the low-hanging fruit items we're going to start looking at. So for instance, supplies, let's say supplies are over budget by 3% consistently. That's a symptom of something going on, right? So if our budget is 5%, we're at 8%, let's dig into what the possible causes are to this symptom. And it's a finite amount of causes, right? So it's either an ordering issue, our inventory system's off, we're ordering from overpriced supplies in general. We don't have our budget in place, so on and so forth. So again, we take that symptom cause solution approach and dig in to exactly where we're over budget in these categories. I may have jumped a little ahead of ourselves, Summer, so why don't you kind of bring it back to some of the questions that maybe we came across during our discussion here.
Well, no, I think really what it is I want to ensure, like, from start to finish, if somebody is not fully aware, it's kind of walking through the steps of how you would take somebody and say, like Monica, when she came in, she knew that her numbers had grown big, big, big. She knew where some things were allocated, some things weren't. She might have understood fixed versus variable overhead, but somebody who say was in Monica's shoes, and really this is for the both of you, where do you start with that? And then where does somebody kind of move as those first moves, those first KPIs that they're really kind of dive into? And like you said, variable overhead is one of the main ones, right? So supplies, things like that. But Monica, you probably had a lot of those that you got to Jake, you kind of started talking about your numbers, you realized some of those variable numbers were out of control. Where do you go from that if that's a big KPI to watch?
So honestly, the first thing, I didn't realize that my collections numbers were so bad. We were like I said, after the first year, we were doing $1 million in production. We did like 85% in collections. Oh my God, dagger to the heart, right? So I was like, why are we doing so much production and we're doing all this work and people are coming back and people are happy, but why do I feel like I have nothing left over at the end of the month? Because we weren't collecting a lot of it. So that was one super big area that I feel like people are like, oh, well, they're trying their best. They're busy. I know it wasn't super good this month. So that's one area as like a young or an old doc that you have to hold your bill people's feet to the fire. So that's the first area to start. Because if you're spinning your drill and you're not collecting what you did, you're never going to catch up on your overhead. So now, Jake, what's our collections? Like 100%, pretty much. Like we're catching up. So we've caught up everything from the past. We collected all that. And then we're just running exactly where we need to be, and anything that's left over, we get. So then that automatically making that 15% swing brings everything down instantaneously. And then you can start dissecting. Like I was ordering too much stuff from too expensive vendors at a not organized interval frequency. So now we make an order every 2 weeks. It goes on a whiteboard. We order just the amount we need. Everything's in tip out bins. I'm obsessed with tip out bins. And then that's kind of how we start chipping away at things. Yeah. If you can see it, you can track it. If you can't see it, you don't know if you have it or if it's in a drawer or someone threw it out.
Right. So to your question, Summer, yeah, I mean, it's dependent on what the needs of the business are. But the first piece is discovering exactly what's going on. As Ashley alluded to, like, don't be afraid to peel back the layers and dig into the books to see, okay, what is exactly happening behind the scenes is driving my overhead. For instance, if you're a practice where you fix collections a little bit, you don't have a spending issue maybe at some point, and really the next piece is going to be driving your production and collection to offset again those fixed costs that aren't going anywhere. The only way to drive down fixed costs is to increase our collection, right? So if that's the case, then we're going to continue to monitor and make sure that our systems are on intact as far as our ordering and keeping our variable costs down. But really our main focus is going to be ways to increase our production and collection to take advantage of our patient flow and that sort of thing. So it's really dependent on what the numbers show us. I will say 9 times out of 10, there is a lot of opportunity when it comes to supplies, lab, and again, some of those low-hanging fruit line items. But again, it's really a custom approach, and it depends on what the practice needs are. So yeah, that's where we start. So I guess if we get into the fixed costs, I guess Summer or Les, you had anything that we wanted to expand on?
No, I think that's great. So really starting with, once you have the numbers allocated in the correct categorizations, you're going to get from your accountant a monthly P&L, looking at where everything falls in what category. And if you see supplies, lab being high, first things, like Monica alluded to, check your collections ratio. Make sure we're actually collecting everything that we've done, because that's going to give you the best correct overhead percentage. Then looking at where your overhead's at, if you are collecting 98% or above, seeing that your overhead is running at 67%, you look at the variable costs first. You look through, which ones are the low-hanging fruits, such as supplies, labs, really checking marketing, things like that, checking and seeing where they are. Start there. Start with those first before, say, starting with firing 2 front office people because you never really liked Jane anyway, or whatever. Is that what I'm hearing, Jake?
Yeah, exactly. So start with the easy stuff first. And the easiest and quickest way to drop overhead is controlling costs in variable spending. I will say also in the allocation cheat sheet that I'm sending, I do have ideal percentages in there as well. So for instance, lab, the supplies, that sort of thing, I do have a target percentage associated. So you can cross compare to see, okay, am I in line with what we call our industry standard, or the percentages to shoot for? So that's, again, very quick way. So that's the first. So yeah, the phases: get your foundational principles set up with your accounting, get to analyzing, figure out the low-hanging fruit is really going to pay off as far as our area of focus. 9 times out of 10 it will. Once we get a handle on that, then we're going to move on to increasing our production and collection to offset fixed costs. Because I see a lot of times where, Summer, I think you've probably seen this in our coaching. I know Ash has. Docs will say, my overhead is high. I'm just going to go take a continuum and increase my CE and start doing implants. Well, the problem with that is that if you have holes in your
produce my way out of it.
Produce your way out, exactly. So what happens with that is, the problem with that is, in that way of thinking, that's fine. But the problem is, if you have holes in your bucket, you're just going to keep adding water to a bucket that has holes in it. You just keep leaking profit, and that top number is going to look real sexy, but you're not going to see any results from that, no profitability from that. So that's, fix the holes and then add water. Yeah, go ahead, Monica.
I think what Ashley said and what you said about not knowing your numbers and CE are connected. I think there's a lot of docs out there that are like, I don't need to know my numbers. I'm scared of them. let me take another CE course. And then they come back from this course and they implement what they learned maybe for a week or two, or then stop, or if things get worse in the office because it's not tight to begin with. And I see a lot of people, they're burnt out. They keep going to this like CE, they learn all this cool stuff, and then they go to their office and it's just less profitable, less profitable, less profitable. And I think you can't really start that fancy CE until you know your numbers and you're like really willing to look at them. Because honestly, I feel like sometimes single tooth dentistry or doing like a crown here, a crown there is a little bit more profitable than full arch. I mean, if you don't do full arch dentistry all the time, sometimes the little stuff and you just a little bit here, a little bit there ends up being a lot more profitable than doing one big case that you're kind of slow at, not super sure, maybe sending it back for a remake. And that's kind of reality of single owner doc dentistry, I think a little bit sometimes.
And talk about the return on your investment from that CE too. That CE is not cheap. Like those, you know, doing sedation courses, doing, you know, those are not cheap courses. So if you're going to invest your money in that, like keep as much as you can while you're at home, you know?
Yeah.
You better be
completely
doing it
agree
all
with
the
you.
time.
Yeah.
That's
well,
right.
and that's what's so hard. And I know that that's a big premise that we all believe in is ensuring that the holes are plugged first, ensuring that there's not holes in the bucket where you're dumping all this money into first marketing, then CE budget, and then all the cool fancy toys, which is all great. But the problem is foundationally things aren't healthy. You're not collecting what you're supposed to. Your overhead becomes out of control because let's be honest, a lot of those things create much higher fixed and variable costs. So
For sure.
it's hard to outrun those things. I apologize if that was mine that was making that noise. But it's really hard to outrun a lot of that stuff at this point. And so yeah, I think that that's a really good solid you know, way of going about things is really get the holes plugged before we start dumping more you know, production type measures in there. So keep going, Jake. So
Actually, I want to take just a quick little sidebar marketing in general real quick, because I've seen a lot of trends here in the dental world after the post shutdown and even leading up to that. So to your point, Monica, investing into marketing because we think that we need more, you know, everyone thinks we need new patients, right? I'm not going to knock any consultancy or group coaching groups out there, but we're going to drive new patients. Well, that's all well and good, but the problem is that one, we may not be set up to accept new patients in the scheduling. And two, if we don't have the right infrastructure and right patient experience, we're going to see these new patients leak out the back door, right? So first, again, little sidebar, the first thing I want to highlight is, you know, marketing for marketing's sake, because we feel like we need new patients, or at least we feel like we're not capitalizing on new patients in general. Well, the first thing I would say is look at your hygiene schedule itself. Look at if you actually block for new patients and see if we have capacity for new patients in a timely manner. Because what we saw in the shutdown specifically is when that recall cycle was broken, you know, 6 months after the March, April, really even into May, some of that shutdown, we saw a massive spike in new patients pretty much across the board. Why? Because the schedule allowed it. So what I would challenge those of you out there, maybe looking at marketing, or you feel like your new patients are stifled or whatever the case may be, start with, again, the low-hanging fruit approach and see if we're actually set up and have the capacity for more new patients in general. You know, blocking the schedule for patients in hygiene, controlling periodic exams, which we can talk about here in a second, because that's an indicator of growth. And really just making sure we're blocking for perio, that sort of thing. And again, ensuring that the scaffolding is ready for new patients. And if all those boxes are checked and we still see a capacity issue, then we look at maybe adding more hygiene hours and that sort of thing, and maybe looking at expanding there along with marketing. But again, I guess the theme here is we don't have to market if our new patients are stifled per se. I would look at, again, the scaffolding and the system itself to make sure that we're actually set up for new patient flow in general. So again, sidebar, but I think that's very important as we're looking, you know, because right now everybody's, you know, super booked. Everyone that I'm talking to is, you know, either, you know, we're down in staff. Somewhere you could talk 16 hours about that right now. We're down in staff. Our patient flow is ridiculous and we can't keep up with this. You know, that will normalize at some point. But I know a lot
I
of
hope
our
not.
docs are looking at,
Well,
it will.
don't we all hope that we can't keep up a patient flow for forever? Like, this is great, right?
Yeah, good problem to have. But
Yeah.
I mean, it eventually will. But I know a lot of docs are like, how can I plan for keep, like to your point, Monica, how can we keep the pedal, down, pedal to the metal? And again, just I would focus on making sure that we're set up for patient flow in general. So yeah, that's again my little side tangent there. So where were we, Summer? You're the one keeping us on track here.
Well, really what I'm trying to do is kind of create almost like a methodical approach for somebody, and that's why I liked having this panel of, are we giving everybody who's listening really an approach of how to start from whether they're just starting, more like Monica when she kind of contacted you, or they're kind of further into their career, are we giving them that methodical approach of where to look and how to use the numbers for decisions? Well, let's take like say Monica now. What if Monica came to you with all the things she's coming to now, or another doctor who's 5-10 years out? What are the numbers we're looking for, as you were alluding to, growth wise, that say there's some red flags, good or bad red flags?
Sure. So I mean, first we do always start with the low-hanging fruit variable cost. If that's all in check, and our main ROI and main opportunity is in growth, and there are certain things you start to look at. So for instance, in Monica's case, she's a multi-doc office now, obviously limited in space, but where we start with her in her cycle of her dental career is in fact that, which is growth. So again, certain things we look for. If you're a single doc office and you've quote unquote plug the holes in your bucket, we start looking at that growth, phase 2, phase 3 stuff. So there are certain things we start to see emerge. One thing is being hygiene production percentage in general. So we've all heard, I'm sure a lot of us have heard anyway, that 30% is ideal. In a one doc office, yes, but if that starts to creep over 30%, I've seen up to 40 or 50, that's honestly a bad thing, because what that is telling us is that's an indicator of the need for more doctor hours, because basically hygiene is growing, and the hygiene revenue is either staying consistent or again growing, and the doctor production isn't quite following that, or in a lot of cases is starting to slide. Because what starts to happen is another triggering point, and I think Summer, you've talked about this, which is a number of periodic exams in general is starting to increase as well. So
hold on one second, just so everybody understands, when you're saying hygiene percentage, just for everybody's knowledge, hygiene percentage is what? When
hygiene production 30%. Percentage of overall office. So if you're producing 100,000 per month as an office, hygiene producing 30,000, that's 30%.
And that is in a one doc general, doing general dentistry, you're saying?
Yes, that's the threshold we shoot for. So again, if you're in this limbo stage where you're maybe looking to grow, these are some triggering points that we look at. So again, 30% or higher is danger zone, or at least again that's opportunity against one of the triggering points where we start digging a little deeper. Again, that's a symptom of something going on. The next layer to that would be looking at the doctor side specifically. So again, if we see hygiene production percentage creeping, let's start looking at the doctor side. So again, if you're doing most doctors, if you're a Monica, 150 periodic exams is okay for her, but honestly 120 to 125 or more is kind of that threshold for danger zone. So if you're a one doc office, that's for really any doctor. But if you're a one doc office, again, I'll back up. 30% of hygiene production percentage is happening or creeping up over that. We start looking at your number of periodic exams, code D0120. If that's over 120 to 125, you probably have a case for needing more doctor hours if your facility will support that. In Monica's case, we had to squeeze 2 doctors in through some creative scheduling. So I'll stop there. Summer, is there anything we need to recap or kind of, revisit as we're moving into the next phases? Yeah, Monica.
I just want to touch base. Probably a lot of people are thinking, why are more periodic exams bad? People are probably thinking more periodic exams is good, right? Because you're going to see more stuff, you're going to diagnose more stuff. But Like you've always said to me, exam fatigue. And it's true. If you're walking into a room, and Summer and I have talked about this, and you're praying to God when you walk in the room, there's no treatment to find. You're like, please, God, hold on to me. I just need to get out of here. I've got so much other stuff to do. You probably have exam fatigue, right? I had a little moment of that today too. I was like, oh God, this patient wants me to do their exam, but my associate's here. I really don't want to do it. I have so many other things to do. So like, that's probably where I've hit my point for the day, the week, the month. I don't want to do any more exams. And then even if there's a bunch of stuff going on, are we doing as crisp of a job diagnosing? Are we doing as crisp of a job presenting? Are we doing that handoff back to the hygienist as well? Probably not. And that's where like treatment slipping out the door, we're losing new patients, or we're losing people that have been with us because they can just kind of feel like we're like, whatever. You can't have that on any patient, and especially like a new patient, right?
And it creeps up really, really fast. And this is the conversation that Jake and I have had, is often we think that it's 2 to 3 hygienists where that exam fatigue is going to start. Or, we all have in our mind that it's, somewhere in that realm. We'll start just tracking how many exams you're doing. I told Jake, like, depending on the ratio and mix of your hygienist, it can actually get pretty large exam count quickly. If they're not seeing a ton of perio, they're seeing a lot more recalls. If they're shortened recalls, kids, like there's just a lot of, a lot that has to be said for if your hygiene schedule is not blocked out for perio and new patients. I was telling him, I watch those numbers amongst my doctors. They could radically change, and they could grow depending on the hygiene schedule. So one thing that I don't know about you all, but I highly suggest that a great metric for doctors to watch is how many exams, and then tracking the amount of treatment that's coming out of those ops, and then divide those numbers, and you'll find out per exam, what are you treatment planning? And you'll find that if you're watching those numbers, I just did it with a doctor literally right before I came in here. And what we saw, just like clockwork, was as she increased her exams, her personal production went down and the amount she treatment planned went down. One, because she was too crazy running back and forth. She couldn't sit in the chair and just do dentistry. And two, it was just getting harder and harder for her to maintain all of it. And there's really, I know we can all attest, there's different sweet spots for every doctor. So that's where tracking those numbers can be extremely helpful in figuring out where that sweet spot is. And Jake, I know that that's a number you utilize, and you utilize with Monica, of like, Monica was doing like 7 million exams or something, I think. I can't remember.
200 plus.
sounds about right. I'm doing the
like
exam right now. No, I'm just joking.
Yeah.
She's sedated, it's fine.
This is actually a cardboard cutout. I'm in the other room.
Right. You could do that somehow, Monica.
Yeah.
You probably could. But truly, right? So that's what you were seeing when you said to Monica, I can't believe you don't have an associate. That's one of your big indicators when
Huge.
Somebody is in the growth phase. So remember, just for everybody listening, because by the way, we had some questions of like, this is all pretty new to some doctors. So first, it's plug the holes. First, it's get overhead under control, get collections and systemization first and foremost under control. Then as you're in the growth phase and you're adding hygienists, or you're adding hours, or you're adding whatever, that's where you're looking at this second set of kind of KPIs and metrics, correct?
Yes, exactly. Okay. So when we're looking at growing, these are some of the triggering points that we start to pay attention to. Tracking this early obviously is massively beneficial, because you can start to correlate, just as you did somewhere, where you can see, okay, this triggers this, or this yields this, or you can, some sort of triggering mechanism to see exactly what works in your practice. Because you're right, every practice is a bit different. Every doctor is a bit different. Obviously, we're human beings. There is a threshold for certain things, but again, we just need to check to see what works. And I will say, if there's some lady dentists out there that feel this sense of being super, super busy, but production is doing this, or starting to do this, and then eventually do this, you're in this, what, as Monica so eloquently put, you're in that exam fatigue. And what we want to avoid, of course, initially is that feeling, but if you're already there, we want to avoid this rocky start of the production month to month, because then that means high exam count, treatment, high exam count, treatment, or vice versa, treatment, high exam count, that sort of thing. And then eventually you're going to start to see a declination, because you're fatigued, you're your schedule itself, your columns itself are just inundated with exams, and you're overworked from overall volume standpoint. And then treatment acceptance starts to slip. So again, that's kind of the following the bouncing ball approach. First, it's hygiene, monitoring exams, and then overall production. You'll start to see slip. I think I have a visual representation of this too, which I can share, of kind of like the graphic of hygiene, triggering points, adding doctors, triggering points. And this applies to whether you're a 1 doc office or a 6 doctor office. It's all the same. It's all the same methodology when it comes to monitoring these numbers. Yeah. So, but the problem is sometimes we get ahead of ourselves, right? Where we think we're going to onboard an associate to focus on implants, and then you're actually doing the reverse order of things, and there's not enough exams to go around. So I guess the flip side of this is making sure that we're not being too preemptive as well. So yeah, that's kind of our approach when it comes to getting a handle on overhead. And as you start to grow by monitoring these triggering points, a lot of times I hear, it's scary bringing on an associate. I know, Monica, you were really hesitant in the beginning because
I was like, really? Are you sure? I don't know. That doesn't sound right.
Everybody tells me you lose money on associates. Well, those are practices that aren't prepared for it. So we suggested getting your overhead at least to 55% or lower before you're ready for this, which again, that's pretty easy to do. Once we have a handle on that, then we can afford to bring on an associate. And Summer, you're really good about this, or you have been in the past, is as you onboard associates, make sure we have some cash on hand, which brings me to my next point, which is kind of looking at our monthly break even, right? MBE, as we call it. You've heard probably barest minimum, break even point, whatever. Our acronym is MBE, monthly break even. And how we identify that is your overhead number, which we identified that all expenses outside of doctor pay. Associates, if you have associates, if you're a 1 doc office, I've seen doctors include their W-2 pay, right? What you pay yourself on payroll. And then your debt service. So debt service, real quick, I guess, example of that is your note payments on your practice loan, any equipment loans you may have out there, lines of credit that you pay. That's what we hold in that debt service. We do not include that in your overhead number because that's really what happens after the fact. So I guess, Summer, do you want me to elaborate on collection, overhead, profit, and then available funds real quick?
Yes, or you once again have a really good diagram too, because I think touch on it, but I think that's a really good diagram that you have that I know I've utilized often with clients. So
okay, so collection, which is our revenue, top line. We have our overhead, right? Expenses outside of doctor pay. Then we have, if you pay yourself some sort of compensation, distributions, so doctor compensation, associates, if you have associates, that gets taken out. Then we're left with what we call profitability, right? That's net profitability. We take it one step further, and then we'll look at our debt. So again, notes, any payments to our notes on our practice loans, lines of credit, equipment loans, all that pay that you pay after those, we're going to deduct that from. And then that we're left with what we call available funds. So all the money basically left over after paying all that stuff each month, right? So that's what we're left over at the end of the month. Now, monthly break even. That's a combination of overhead. Our associates could pay that if we have associates on board. If you want to include your W-2, we can do that. I've seen a lot of times doctors will do either or. Either you can include yourself or you don't. And then, of course, our debt service. So those line items comprise our monthly break even. That's a huge number to pay attention to because, as we alluded to, Summer, when you're onboarding associates, we like to make sure we have at least 1.5 to 2 times our monthly break even in our basically an operating account, our checking account, to make sure we have cash on hand. Because as we know, or as we should know, as we onboard associates or any transition, for that matter, we're going to see a bit of dip in our profitability. So we're going to see a bit of a hit during any transition most of the time. So we want to make sure we have our cash on hand, and a good moniker, a good, goal is to have at least 2 1.5 to 2, ideally 3 times that monthly break even on hand at all times. Did I skip anything, Summer?
I don't think so. Monica, how did you see that as you were in that growth phase and it was quick, right? How did you see that play out for you? First you were scared, and then you told Jake you was crazy. And then where did you go from there?
What he said, I was like, all right, I'm gonna listen to the crazy man in the sweater vest. And it worked. The amount, even though I didn't have a super high producing profitable associate, and it didn't work out with that associate, the amount that I was able just to step away from the chair. And even if someone, like I've told Jake this before, even if it's someone's maybe like a hygiene babysitter, it allowed me to come in, be more productive, keep my schedule tight, lean, be super profitable every minute of the day I'm there, and allow me enough time to then go work on the business to improve things behind the scenes. So I don't know that I can't explain it. It made a huge difference. Even not having the right associate necessarily, having an associate that you trust, but you know, people are always looking like, Summer, you have a bunch of amazing high producing associates. Like that is, you've coached them all, grown them all. That's hard to do. That's the part where I'm still trying to learn to be like Summer and get that coaching technique down. But that's some ninja guru stuff. But even just having a little less time in the office and be able to breathe and think a little bit will make you more profitable, and you'll be doing more in less time. It's crazy how I'm producing more now than working 4 days than I was 7, right? Yeah. That doesn't make any sense, right? If you say that, people be like, no, there's no way. But actually, yeah, because people don't drop off your schedule. You're more in demand. People will stick with it because they know if they cancel, they're not going to get to see you for a month. It drives that kind of capacity in the office, I want to say.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think it really does become more of like a recipe card if you do kind of the steps that we just discussed with reducing overhead, then doing more of the producing more, ramping up production, and then you can kind of methodically insert that associate at certain points when you've kind of prepped. Sometimes I see people are either underprepared or they were like, so, I mean, I think we've all seen this too, where they were needing that associate for so long that it was almost like hard to even get them in and get things going because they just didn't have time themselves to onboard well. So sometimes it's really just understanding the numbers. And I would highly suggest, after this, really take advantage of talking to Jake about understanding those numbers better will really truly help you get to that point where, Monica, you reached out and you said, I'm not quite understanding all of this and I grew so quickly, help me understand where I'm going. And it really was just, you needed a little bit better understanding of the numbers to make those better decisions. And then it's taken you truly to just that next level. So I think reaching out really for help with somebody who does this all the time is so helpful.
Or the right accountant. Like, I don't feel like the accountants have the same grasp. You talk to him. I have an amazing accountant. I love him, but he doesn't have the same grasp. We don't have the same conversations that Jake and I have. Right. So you need someone who sees this all the time, who's going to be able to figure out what unique situation you have. I don't have an opportunity to expand. So I need to conquer my overhead by doing more with more and less, and we need to figure that out. And so we figured that out together. But if you talk to an accountant, they're like, well, can you move spaces? Well, no, I can't, right? So we need creative solutions and stuff like that. And that's where Jake and you guys have really stepped in, and we've brainstormed to figure that out. So
absolutely. Yeah, accountants are so great at what they do for what they do, and especially when it comes to taxes, right? We need them. That's not necessarily Jake, but it is nice to have really that level of strategy, baseline information, what to do with it, and then strategy for growth, I think is so important for sure. Well, really, we have a few minutes here left at the end. Jake, I know one thing that you love to do, and you alluded to it, is really like, it's almost like every single office, every single case, and Ashley, I think you would attest to this too, is so individualized as to what they need, what that prescription for that practice should be. And it's so based on the doctor themselves, who they are, how they like to lead, what they like to do. Knowing that, where do you start with, either one of you, when somebody comes to you and has some of these questions like Monica, where do you guys start and what do you do?
Well, first you look at the facts, because a lot of times it's like when a patient comes in, they say it's, I don't know my teeth numbers, but teeth number 16 or whatever the hell it is back here. Teeth number 16. And you're like, well, actually it's teeth number, it's on the other side of your mouth, man. What the hell? What's wrong with you? But so they come in and say this tooth, but it's really this tooth, right? So I see that a lot of same thing happening, misprescription, misdiagnosis. That's an Alistair McDonald quote, but I'm stealing it for this webinar. So thank you, Alistair. Misprescription, misdiagnosis. So really it's a feeling versus the facts, right? So let's look at the facts of the business. And then we direct our attention to see, what are really getting, what's the biggest ROI? So like in Monica's case, there was a little bit of cleanup with collection, right? So let's take her as a case study real quick. Monica's case, because she came in 3 years ago, we fixed collection. That was an opportunity. Her supplies kind of normalized at that point. So I said, okay, let's monitor that. But really, the opportunity in ROI is exactly what we did, which is focusing on onboarding associates, making sure the practice is systemized and ready for additional patient flow and growth, and really just taking advantage of what the practice is giving us, right? So really it's starting with what's factual versus what's feeling, and understanding what the implications and what the impact is from, again, looking at our symptom cause solution approach. So all these red flags, all this red that we may see, I look at those as opportunities, right? Or a symptom of something going on. I'll kind of allude back to that. If we're showing a symptom, let's figure out the cause to that. Take an Eastern versus Western medicine approach, and let's figure this out and fix that forever, and move on to something else. So that's kind of my approach. It's kind of wide range, but again, it's really based on what the practice needs and what the practice is showing us, facts versus what the feelings are.
Yeah, absolutely, which makes a huge difference. Ashley, you've been in a lot of practices. Where do you see, that approach have to change or goes a little bit awry based on, the leader of the practice or leaders?
I think just kind of like what Jake is saying, it has to do with what you think is the problem, and sometimes what it actually is. You have to be open. You have to be coachable. Sometimes the answer might not be what you want to hear. Sometimes it isn't necessarily the what you thought the problem was. And I think that's absolutely okay, and just being okay with the fact that clearly something's wrong. We talk about often that one of my favorite books in the DSI, totem is extreme ownership. And it's about, owning the fact that whatever is going wrong is your fault. So if you're open to getting that feedback, you're gonna be open more to these creative solutions. Like Monica was saying, she's like, I listened to the crazy guy in the sweater. I was like, all right, you know what? Clearly what I'm doing isn't working. So let's give this a whirl, because what do I have to lose? So just being open to it.
It's more freeing when you're like, everything that's wrong in my practice is actually my fault because I can control this. Before, when I didn't know everything was my fault, I felt like I was at the whim of like, oh my God, this person's not showing up for work today, or oh my God, this happened, and like, why can't you feel like you don't have any control of it. And then when you're like, actually, all these problems are just my fault, and I need to change what I'm doing, it like, bing, light bulb moment, and you can actually change them. Like my office is completely different now than it was when I first started talking to you guys. Like, you guys heard all my horror stories the whole entire way through, like 3 years of horror stories. Like from now to then, it's 2 different practices. And if I would go back in time, I would laugh at myself from 1 year of being open, because you're like, what were you doing, man? Like, whoa, oh my God. So
yeah. Oh, for sure.
Everybody's had that light bulb moment in our group. I feel everyone's like, oh wow, dang, like why didn't I just do this 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Right.
And
well, and
go ahead. Sorry, Summer.
Well, I'm like, I think that's so much of the first step is humbling yourself. Because I mean, I was years out and I had actually had to be like, hey, Jake, I don't actually think I quite understand this. And I'm super embarrassed to say that I probably should know this. We have somebody in the chat group who was just saying, I'm really confused about what monthly break even is. And I'm like, that's so normal and good. And by the way, Jake, I think when you put in your little diagrams and sheets and everything, I think so much of this will be clear to them because they'll get to see it and study it, which visually will be a lot easier. So thank you for doing those. But go ahead and finish what you were saying, Jake.
I never agreed to put all these sheets on here. I don't know what you're talking about.
You said several.
I did say several. Oh man, I don't remember saying several, but I'm just kidding, of course. I was going to mention, as if you do this on your own, like that's totally fine too. Like, or if you have somebody help you, whatever. The first step is just like we all kind of started off with, is being humble enough and just like Ashley said, having the courage just to dig into this stuff and don't be afraid of what the numbers reveal. First off, the second of all, if you see what we call these, red flags or overages or what have you, don't take it as a negative thing. These are actually beautiful opportunities. So back to Monica's point, this is a great opportunity to actually get better at something, whether it's supplies, because a lot of times we had just real quick, one of our masterminders was off 3%, in supplies. Doesn't sound like a huge number, but because of his volume, that was like a $400,000 swing per year. So again, every percentage counts. So as you move through this, just look at every red line item, which Summer, I think you're in both you and Monica are really good at this. Every red line item is an opportunity. And like Monica said, it's up to you to fix because no one's going to fix it for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Don't you look for it like every single time when you get Jake's numbers to see if you did a little bit better than last month? And the ones don't, you're like, oh crap, I knew I screwed that up this month. Like I'm gonna work a little bit better. It's just it's not gonna be dramatic. It's every little day, every little week. It's just a little bit better, and then 3 or 4 years later, you have a big difference. So
yeah. Well, and in some practices, I know we've seen, including yours, like it can be as quickly as a few months that people can shave off overhead. I mean, I've talked to practices that I was blown away by just being intentional and finally knowing the numbers. They shaved off huge amounts of overhead truly in like 3 months by making a few quick switches. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, anything else final for anybody to say before I just kind of wrap up?
Yeah, I just kind of want to circle back to how similar the two of you were when you kind of finally decided that you were going to like take this step. Like, I think it was like 4 years apart or something when Summer, joined the mastermind and when Monica did. But I like looking back and comparing the two, like, I just remember you're both like, okay, here we go. Like, I know I need this information. I'm scared as hell, but we're doing this. Let's go. Like Monica, God bless. I loved it so much. She had her parents there with her, and she was like, "Okay, we're doing this."
I know I need to do this. I'll never forget it. I was like, "Oh shit!"
Yeah, you're like, "Here we go."
I know.
But how freeing was it? Like you said, how freeing was it to just take control of that ownership of it? And I think that just to end on that point, like, just don't be afraid of those numbers. Like they're
yeah, absolutely. Well, and what I would say is, Jake, what's the room in DSN where people can really kind of dig into more questions with you? Because DSN has Jake, by the way, as a resource right on it.
Yeah. So. Understanding practice analytics, that's the room. And I'd love to help anyone out there, especially you ladies. So my contribution for allowing me to be in this coveted group today. You can reach out to me directly. You can direct message me on DSN. And also in the Understanding Practice Analytics room, I have a little link where you can schedule like just a discovery call with me so we can chat about some of the issues or opportunities rather that you're facing, and maybe we can chat more about that. But I'd love to offer any type of advice as I can.
I love that. And that's not like just like Jake's salesman technique. Like when he says issues is actually opportunity, like it's legit. It is. It's just opportunities for growth, and it's opportunities to take control of your situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a practice that you want, not the practice that you feel like you have no control over. So yeah, absolutely.
What did we say, Summer? Have a practice that creates time, not drains time.
Yes, you said that. I went,
Oh, I did. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I just said, that's a good one.
So humble.
So, yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you so very much. Ash, is there anything else to end with?
That's all. If you're a part of this webinar, you'll get an email to get CE if you would like it. And thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Jake. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Monica.
Bye, Laura.
We love you,
Bye,
Monica, too. I haven't seen you forever. Love that.
Bye, guys.
Bye.